I just, I just, I just speak my peace, keep my peace.
What's good, everybody? Welcome to episode 93 of the Speak on Peace podcast. As always, I'm your gracious host, Greg Lacey. Like we always do about this time, I hope that you all are still taking the proper precautions to take care of yourself and your loved ones, to protect yourself and your loved ones as we continue to battle the evils of this world, whether that's sickness, illness, uh, and many other things that we have to deal with in this world. I do want to start this episode off by sending my thoughts and prayers to the family of the young boy whose life was taken out here in California on the freeway as a result of road rage. The story that I read was mother was driving, was cut off by someone. One thing led to another. Somebody decided to um, let off rounds in the trunk of this mother's car, and one of the bullets struck and hit her son in the abdomen and claimed his life. The reason why I'm starting off this way is because, and I know I've been covering death a lot in these episodes, but it's just, that's something I've been covering. So every time I see things in regards to death, it's been hitting home. But there's been another incident that's been going on, not really involving death, but here locally for my local listeners. In California, there's been like 60 different incidents related to um, pellet guns, BB guns being fired into people's cars on the freeway, getting their windshield shattered, getting their passenger seat window shattered, getting their driver's seat window shattered. Um, and it's just like I don't know what the motive is behind it. It's been going on for the past couple of weeks. I've been seeing it covered in the news for the past couple of weeks, probably for the past month, and they haven't caught the suspect or anything like that. So I'm not really sure the motive behind it, but I know it keeps going on and it's sporadic. Like it happens in one area, then it happens in another area, and the areas like they won't be like near each other. Um, but you can tell just like from what has been carried out, like it's the same motive, it's the same person, which is hard to identify when I speak of the motive, but it's going on. And so initially, when I first heard this story of the young boy, and I don't want to disclaim his name because um, it was a child, it was a minor, and things go on with. I know the child's name has been released, so you all can look it up. But I know that there's like laws that prohibits the release of child names, and I'm not going to release it on this podcast, so you all can look it up. But just getting back to what I was speaking about, when I first heard the story, I thought that this was the first one that turned fatal of these incidents, because it's been 60 incidents. No one has lost a life. It's just been damage to people's cars, and police haven't been able to catch the suspect. And so when I initially read the story or saw the story of this young boy's life being taken, I thought, okay, now they've taken it too far, and they claimed someone's life, but it was two isolated incidents and not related to each other. But that just goes to show, I've been covering the past 3 or 4 episodes, just us, protecting ourselves. This is the reason why I say, protect ourselves in the beginning of every podcast episode now, is because you know not even just in the sense of COVID. Like, yes, we're battling COVID, and it's important that we protect ourselves against that. But it's like we have to protect ourselves against those in this world as well, because people, they cause harm, they claim lives, and they just, they're not right in the head, and they're, I don't know if impeding is the correct word, but they're impeding on people's lives, and that evil is seeking onto other people's lives, and it's unfortunate. But we just got to stay vigilant. We got to stay aware. We got to stay informed, because it's just crazy out here. And I do apologize. Before I do get into the episode, you're gonna hear a lot of background noise. I tried to record. Look, I don't have the ventilation in this room that I record these episodes in all set. We don't. This is the one room in our home that we don't have a fan. We just have windows. And normally when I record, I close the windows because I have a dynamic microphone that literally picks up everything. And so, for those of you who have been around for the past 2 or 3 years, y'all remember those early New York episodes. Y'all would hear the police sirens like right outside, even though I didn't live like I lived close to the street, but I was like not really close to the street. Y'all would hear, the police sirens. Y'all would hear the subways. I still have the same microphone. I love this microphone. I try to switch, and y'all probably seen that. but this microphone picks up everything. And so y'all going to hear stuff going on outside this window as I record episode 93, just because I have a window cracked open a lot. It's starting to get hot in California. I bear with it the past 3 or 4 episodes, and I will literally just finish recording, and I will have sweat under my armpits, and it wasn't a nice feeling. So I said, you know what, I'm not going to deal with that this time, and so I'm gonna crack the window a little bit. So again, ahead of time, I do apologize for you all who may hear background sounds throughout this recording because I do have my window cracked open. With all that being said, again, welcome to the Speak One Piece podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Welcome to my YouTube viewership. Whatever you decide to tune in or whatever you decide to stream on, welcome. Thank you for tuning in to the Speak One Piece podcast. If it's your first time, welcome. If it's not, welcome back. Thank you for deciding to continue to rock with me. Speaking of COVID and protecting ourselves of COVID, I probably had my biggest lapse of judgment in COVID this past weekend. Just going to a party, not a party like partying with people, but it was a family party. But it was a huge gathering. It was a lot of people. I didn't mask up. I didn't even. I was going into the party. I didn't think about masking up. And with 3 days removed, I don't have any symptoms. I'm going to get tested tomorrow, so hopefully those tests come back positive. But I think I'm really of the mind state now. So like, I understand the precautions with COVID. I understand, we need to, wear a mask and go in a public setting because we don't want to risk putting others at harm. But now it's like I've seen other people have so many lapse of judgment. I didn't had a couple of lapse of judgment, none as serious as this past weekend, but I didn't had a couple of lapse of judgment as well. And none of them have proven fatal. None of them have affected my health. So now I'm just like, I don't want to say I'm invincible, but I think that I'm like as a part, we go through certain stages with dealing with COVID. You go with the people who initially their reaction is denial. You go with people who initially their reaction is maybe fright, where they're afraid of the unknown. You go through people who, there may be a stage of adjustment, just adjusting to a new life and protecting themselves. And you may people who may regress back to denial. I don't know if denial is the actual word, but it's probably some form of progression. And I think that's the stage that I'm in. Like I understand that if I want to go to a public gathering with people I don't know, I have to mask up. I understand that, I want to go to an event, I have to mask up just because it's guidelines and it's laws that prohibits me doing otherwise. But I think that this past weekend, going to this family gathering of mine, I felt comfortable enough to not wear a mask. I, I guess it's hard to really explain that when I think about it. But I feel comfortable enough to not wear a mask and not to think that anyone was putting my health at risk and knowing that I wasn't putting anyone's health at risk. So I'm going to get my test tomorrow. I will report next episode whether it comes back positive or negative. But I think that I'm all right. And speaking about all that, we're moving in the right direction. We've been dealing with this new normal for a year and a half, and stuff is starting to open back up. California just announced on June 15th that, they're allowing places to open up. They're allowing places to open at full capacity for the first time in a year and a half. They're allowing, these public events and public sports gatherings and concerts and venues like that. They're allowing them to operate at full capacity again. They're allowing restaurants to operate at full capacity. They're allowing restaurants to operate 100% indoor capacity or indoor dining, I should say. There's a lot of developments, and I'm going to cover this in the next episode because I did see an interesting article this week that I do want to cover in terms of COVID. But just in regards to progression, I think that we are moving in the right place for state officials and health officials to feel comfortable. Granted, the majority of this stuff is because of the rates of vaccination. I think we're at a point right now, currently, on May 26th, where I believe half of America is fully vaccinated and like 3/4, or not even 3/4, probably nearly 3/4. I think it's like high 60s or something. It has at least one vaccination, which is high percentages. I still haven't gotten mine. That's not the reason why I feel comfortable in doing whatever I'm doing. I'm not going to get mine as of right now, but I think that's the reason why guidelines are starting to become more lenient and things are opening up because um, the country has, progressed in terms of vaccination percentages. Um, and so, we're still battling with this, we're still dealing with this, but I am happy to see things open back up. I am happy that, movie theaters are opening. I am happy that it's the midst of NBA playoffs and these arenas are allowing fans in their arenas. It's just it's just a bunch of great things that's going on, and I'm definitely happy to see that progression. And speaking about COVID and speaking of past year, the biggest landmark, the biggest event, the biggest topic that we've seen or we've covered this past year while we've been staying at home, while we've been quarantined at home, was, in my opinion, the death of George Floyd. There was many deaths this past summer um, that were due to uh, police harassment, um, racial injustice, oppression, all the things that you check off the boxes for. But I think one of the headline deaths was George Floyd. Yesterday marked the 1 year mark since the death of George Floyd. And I feel like I've covered it a lot in my episodes following the death of George Floyd because we had the end of the year recap, we had the 1 year in COVID recap, we had the episode where I covered the verdict of Derek Chauvin, the pig who murdered him. And so I know I've spoken on it a lot, and I don't want to beat you all over the head with it. But I think I would be remiss if I didn't reflect on what this past year has been since the death of George Floyd. For those of you who don't know, you've been living under a rock. You don't watch the news. You stay away from media. George Floyd was a man who was killed, who was strangled to death as a result of a pig using excessive force, trying to detain. I don't want to say detain someone because the man was already detained. Essentially, a pig kneeled on the man's neck for 9 minutes, 9.5 minutes, nearly 9.5 minutes, as his body laid on the concrete. And even after he strangled, I don't know if strangled is a term. I believe strangled is a term because it affects his windpipe. But even after the man was strangled to death and his body lay lifeless on the pavement, this pig continued to drive his knee into his lifeless body to ensure that he was dead. Um, there was a huge trial that followed this a month ago, and as a result, this pig was held accountable, um, guilty on 3 counts, and rightfully so. But the reason why I want to cover it is because of just the aftermath of what the death of George Floyd caused this country and worldwide. Y'all remember, and I say it with no ill will or no intent, but I spoke about it when George Floyd was first murdered. I said that man will be a martyr because I saw the momentum that shifted and was carried on from his death, or as a result of his death. I said that you know his death wouldn't go in vain, and that whatever it was, and I couldn't pinpoint what it would do, that it would cause some change. Um, the first thing was just like in regards to the life after George Floyd death, it caused a lot of civil unrest. Like last summer of 2020, people took to the streets and marched all day and all night to demand justice, to bring attention to the murder of George Floyd, just to bring attention to the murder of Breonna Taylor, to bring attention to the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, to bring attention to the murder of Elijah Blake, um, and so many other names. It's a countless amount of names who of people of color, especially Black people, whose lives have been taken at the hands of police, or pigs, or while in their custody. And so I remember speaking to my one of my friends during this time when people were protesting. This is in the thick of COVID. We didn't really know what COVID was. We knew that the world was shutting down. We knew that we were prevented from really being outside and being around each other. And despite all that, people was marching through the streets. People were gathering. People were doing whatever they need to do to bring awareness and demand justice. In the name of George Floyd and the countless amount of other people whose lives have been taken. And the reason why I bring this conversation I had with my friend, because he said to me, he was like, just think about how serious, all this is that people are literally out here risking their lives to protest, to bring awareness to this thing. Like, this is how important this issue is. And that stuck with me because I didn't really think of that initially. But when I sat back and watched all these protests and city to city and state to state and seeing all the people out there gathering, it was like, that's essentially what they're doing. They're saying that, this issue, this cause is so important that I am willing to either risk my health or unfortunately risk my life to bring awareness to injustice across this world, to people of color. And that was something so poignant, and that was something just so powerful to witness. I never got out there. I was never one of the people in the marches, but as I saw them carried out throughout the entire year, I watched it, joyfully and gratefully and happily, because this is how important this issue is. This is how important this topic is for these people, because they're willing to pay the ultimate sacrifice. And even if I'm being honest, not to toot my own horn, even in the death of George Floyd, in regards to this podcast, we recorded some of the best episodes as a result of the death of George Floyd. And what I mean by that is that, early in this podcast, I was trying to find my identity. Like those first 40 episodes, I was trying to find my identity. I started this podcast with just me venting. I kind of drifted into me covering hot topics and pop culture, and then also covering sports and also covering rap. And it was just really just like all over the place, trying to tailor, what I really wanted this podcast to be. And as I progressed through the years, more of the topics I began to cover was focused on the voiceless. What I mean by voiceless is the people who are often spoken for but never heard, which is people of color, women, young people. These are people who were often left. These are people who are often left out when topics surrounding them or decisions involving them are made. And so I started off this podcast, not really understanding or trying to really not really knowing my identity, but the death of George Floyd really got me to find a niche, or got me to find an identity, because I was borderline covering these topics, but I was also staying on the other side of like covering, the other topics that I wanted to cover. And after the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, I really got into, covering, bringing awareness to these injustices, and bringing awareness to, Black unity and Black power and things like that. And I think that I think that you really took to those episodes just based off of the conversations I was having with people outside of this podcast, the things that people were reacting to, the things that people wanted to talk about in regards to the podcast. I got the most interaction with my listeners as a result of me covering those topics, more than I did in the previous 40 or 50 episodes. So as a result of that, I started to really find my lane and what was working for me. And here we are today, 93 episodes in, really 95 because I had 2 extra episodes. but 95 episodes in, and I'm starting to see my engagement is really spiking as a result of the topics that I'm covering. And I appreciate you all for that. But I really appreciate George Floyd, just going back to him being a martyr and the things that he opened up for a lot of people and that he never knew. And he probably couldn't have even imagined in his lifetime. And that was like another one of those trickle down effects of what his death did for people. So the first box was, the civil unrest for people getting out there and protesting and risking their lives and risking their health to bring awareness to these issues like social injustice and racial inequality and police brutality and racism and systematic racism. Um, that's what his death did. And then as a return for me personally, it really helped me find a lane for this podcast and where I should go and who I should be tailoring these episodes to. Another trickle down effect, another effect that the result of George Floyd's life being taken was the enlightenment that he provided for a lot of people. Like I myself, I saw a lot of people who I never saw in my entire life speak about issues dealing with racial inequality, dealing with racism, dealing with systematic oppression. I've saw people who I've known for 10+ years who have never uttered any of those words, who have never tweeted any of those words, who never posted on Facebook or MySpace about any of those words, now becoming enlightened and now speaking about these things and now shedding light on certain experience they may have witnessed where may have went through some of those situations they didn't know before. um, in my past, I was one of the type of people that would like to highlight those people and talk down with people like, oh, you have the luxury of ignoring these things for so long, and now you're finally, enlightened, and now you're finally aware, and now you want to speak about it. And like, it doesn't work like that. And I spoke about just my progression with that in this podcast as well. As an adult, I don't really care about that no more. I find joy in seeing my people and seeing other people of color and non people of color speaking about these things, because the more we continue to bring awareness to this, the more people are informed and the more changes that can happen. Um, and so I definitely appreciated it. And that was another one of those effects of his death, is that he enlightened a lot of people of things that were going on in this country that has been going on in this country for 400 years. And for a lot of people, they were able to ignore it. And now it was like, we're all sitting here, we're all stuck at home, we're all, tuning into the same media, whether that's television, whether that's on the laptop, or whether that's on the cell phone. We're all, getting the same media, and we're all interacting with the same thing. So the same stories are being shared, the same conversations are being having, and the same topics are being covered. And so now we can ignore it. So now we all have this, this big conversation about it. And I appreciated it. Again, I don't mean any of this. I don't mean any of this in vain. I don't mean that the man's life should be taken, because under no circumstances should that have happened. But, I appreciated what the result. I can't even say I appreciate what the result of his life been taken. I do appreciate what our after effects was. It's unfortunate that a life was been taken, but the effect that it provided on us as people, I am appreciative of that. Another thing in regards to George Floyd's life being taken is bills got introduced. It sucks that we're a year removed from his life being taken, and we don't have any bills that have been passed in regards to the abuse or harassment against subjects to people of color. I don't understand why none has been passed on the countrywide level, but I'm glad that they've been introduced. You got to take everything with a grain of salt. It shouldn't take a year for these things to happen. We know the idiot who was in office who probably had no intentions of passing things like that, especially when you're running a campaign that's very prejudiced against people of color. It's kind of hard to pass things like that. But I hope soon that this new office, that this new regime can get something passed. I know it's not solely up to the president. I know that, there's more people who weigh in on these decisions, who have an effect on these decisions, but I hope that this happens soon, because bills banning no knock warrants, it shouldn't have no pushback. Bills preventing the harassment against people of color um, shouldn't have any pushback. We go back to the conversation speaking about the value of our people and how they see us. This is how you show us our value. You allow these things to be passed and let us know. When we speak about that allyship, y'all know I hate that word, but people want to be allies so bad. Here you go. Be our ally in this. Show us that our lives matter. Pass the bill. Introduce more bills. Have these conversations so that we understand and we feel like we can maneuver in this country, in this world, without being subjected to harassment that may claim our lives. Another thing that has happened in this past year is that big companies have began to back messages surrounding Black unity and Black power and amplifying Black people, and I loved it. I think some of it was genuine and some of them was not genuine, but I appreciate seeing these conversations. I appreciated seeing these funds being donated to these HBCUs or being donated to the NCAA NCAAP, no, NAACP. I'm sorry. I like to see that these companies in their diversity and inclusion um, staff amplifying the need to protect people of color, because I understand what's going on in the world. Like me specifically, I enjoyed how my company has handled the death of George Floyd and the death of many of the Black people. I definitely enjoyed that. There has been an open forum going on for the past year, every 2 weeks, to where we can speak with the head of the company and voice our opinions. Or the head of a company is open enough, and even not being a person of color, and she's able to have these conversations with us and open the floor and allow people to ask questions and allow people to get understanding, because that's how you show value in your people who feel like they don't have any value in this world. Like if I was one of those people who saw these things go on and let it affect me, it would be easy to get caught up mentally and believe that I don't have any value, that no one you know cares for me or thinks about me, and that I shouldn't be here and things like that. Um, if I was one of those type of people, and then I was to go to work the next day and see that the CEO or CFO of my company is allowing open forum and allowing discussion and allowing questions and trying to get answers, trying to get understanding, and trying to allow people to vent because they see how they're covered in the media or see how they've been harassed by these pigs and things like that. I definitely would have been appreciative. But even me not being the type of person, me being the type of person who doesn't handle emotions well, me being a person who doesn't show their emotions, me being a person who's not really affected by a lot of things too much. Um, I definitely am in those calls very appreciative to see that the person in the highest position in my company having these open forums and allowing us to express ourselves and allowing us to get understanding, allowing people who don't look like us to get understanding straight from the horse's mouth. I've appreciated that. There's been some companies who put the commercials up and put the ads up and had certain lawsuits come within their company and things been exploited like that. I remember Adidas being one of them. I remember Adidas um, employees had like a strike or something outside of their headquarters because they were pushing all of these positive messages about diversity and inclusion, but there was incidents going on within their headquarters where people were being targeted because of the color of their skin. And it's just like, how are you, spending so much money in ad dollars and putting these placements here and aligning with these messages because it's like cool thing to do, while you have people internally who feel like they're being subjected to those same things that the people outside of your company are being subjected to. And like just didn't add up. And not to single out Adidas, because there's definitely probably more companies than that. But I remember Adidas being one of the biggest ones that I remember. But a lot of these companies were putting out those messages and aligning with the Black Lives Matter movement and aligning with Black unity and Black power and empowerment. And then that was just that. They were just spending money, media dollars to get these ad plays there because that was the topic of the conversation. Um, and they didn't want to be left out. Yeah, I remember like the Blackout Tuesday. I participated in that and I didn't even know really what it was. And I'm full disclaimer, I'm an idiot. But a lot of companies participate in that Blackout Tuesday thing, not really knowing what it's for, not really knowing what it's about, but still carrying out, prejudice and racist things within their workplaces. It was a terrible thing, but there were some big companies that started certain things, um, maybe realized that they weren't doing something for the past 30, 40, 50 years, and decided to now have a hand in certain things, and now fix their company going forward. I definitely appreciated that because that opened a lot of doors for a lot of people. That opened up jobs for a lot of people because you can't have these type of conversations. You can't have these type of teams of a diversity and inclusion and not having a diverse and inclusive team. It's kind of like I don't know if it's an oxymoron, but it would be weird. Um, Another thing that was covered, or another thing that I was proud of as a result of this past year, or another thing that I'm gonna stop saying proud and appreciative. Another thing that has happened in this past year that I felt like was positive was also the representation of our people in media. Um, I started to see an influx of commercials with black people. I started to see an influx of commercials with all black families, not like mixed families, not families and maybe one light skinned person. I'm not gonna say I stopped seeing colorism because it still exists, but I started to see more black people amplified on the TV. I started seeing more black people amplified in ads. I started to hear more black voices, voiceovers and things like that. Like I start to see more of my people and hear more of my people, which I thought was great. Like I've been preaching and screaming for representation for I don't know how long, and you all know how I feel about representation. I think that you know I'm of the I am of the mind state that the children are the future, like Whitney Houston said. And if they're the future and the only representation they have is of people who don't look like them, we limit them. We limit their capabilities. We limit, their dreams. We limit their aspirations. We limit their hopes because they see someone that doesn't look like them in a position that they may have won or a position that they may have dreamt to attain. And when you don't see someone that looks like you may not to believe it's unattainable, especially when you don't see someone who look like you in a position that you may dream of. And then you also see how certain people or a certain group of people are treating another group of people that look like you. A lot of those things can be damaging to a young child's mind. We know how in those formidable years, how gullible children are. We know how aware, I don't say aware, you know how much external factors play a part in the shaping of a child's mind. And so when they don't have representation, it kind of limits their ability to dream. It kind of limits their ability to um, want to achieve these massive goals and try to hit these peaks and understand that the sky's the limit. Like they believe that the roof is the limit. They don't see someone that look like them in certain positions or in a certain role. And so as I began to see, these commercials with black families, started to seeing more people in, leading actors in black movies, started to see, black doctors speaking on television. I started to see more black scientists and things like that. And just hearing black stories and seeing black people, that was definitely something that has been amplified in the past year. And I hope that it continues to go on because, as long as these children see these examples, the sky's the limit for them. And that's entirely what's most important. Um, Another thing, and the last thing that I want to cover about this past year was just, and this goes back to the first thing I spoke about, was just the civil unrest. One of those things, one of those topics that they were, you know, protesting for relentlessly in that summer, in the hot summer months, and whether it was DC, California, New York, Texas, or Seattle, Washington, it was for police reform. They were protesting the systematic racism that exists in these police stations and the police departments and the systematic racism that built the police force. Um, they were protesting against that idea of policing and having people who don't look like the people in the communities they're policing, um, taking advantage of those people and harassing those people and claiming the lives of those people. Um, a lot of those protests was backed by that. They were crying for, I don't want to say crying, they were rallying to have money removed from these police departments and having invested in the communities instead. They were rallying to have police removed from these communities because they're not doing anything but um, adding to the homicide rates in these cities. And one of those states I remember was Washington. I don't know if the city was actually Seattle. I don't know what cities they all happened, but the state of Washington, I remember there was some protests going on for days, where the protesters were clashing with the police. There was a lot of riot gear out, police fighting and clashing with the protesters. And these protesters were out there fighting for police reform. They wanted money taken out of the police budget and put in the communities to help build up the communities, to help provide resources for these kids, the same kids I was talking about that are the future, and just helping grow the community within, because whatever that those budgets were that were allocating so much money to these police departments, it just wasn't helping, and they weren't doing a job. Like, I think of it like, if if I'm doing a job, if I was hired to do a certain job and I don't do that job well, to continue to give me money and to continue to attribute to my salary while I'm doing such a horrible job, um, it's not going to correct the issue. And so I never understood what the reasoning or the thought process was to continue to pour money into these police departments. It's like they're not doing their job well. So what are they being rewarded for? What is this money going towards? Why do we feel the need to continue to bring people into these departments when they are causing such a bad effect in the community? Because in the end of the day, the communities are what's most important, not this police department. And so I've never understood that thinking. And in no other job will you be paid, no, in no other job will you receive money and continue to receive contributions in terms of salary for doing a piss poor job. So why in this one occupation it's the opposite? I never understood that. But the reason why I speak about Washington specifically is because they had those huge clashes with the police, and they were literally on the ground level fighting with the people, and it paid off. I read an article last week about how the state of Washington enacted like more than a dozen police reform laws. I don't know exactly what those laws are, but they are cutting $840 million from police budgets in Washington. $840 million. $840 million. They have cut that. I don't know what the entire budget was. I believe it was in the billions. But just think about $840 million being attributed to departments who aren't doing their job well, who don't understand their job, obviously, and are not using the job to seek the proper training to handle this community. And so now that's $840 million that they can pour into the community. They can build, recreation centers. They can dump money into the school systems. They can dump money to provide more outlets for these kids. They can dump money into STEM, programs for these young kids. They can dump money to building, improving the streets or improving, wherever the case may be. Anything other than attributing money to those police departments will be useful, because you will see some type of improvement. As a result of this budget cut, I think they reported like more than 260 million pigs have left police departments in Washington, which I don't care. Um, but it's like rightfully so. Like, y'all should leave. Y'all should have been left, because y'all were the problem, never the civilians, never the members of the community. because all they did was inhabit those habitats, or cohabitate in those habitats, or cohabitate, I should say. Not every community is perfect. Not every community, is flawless. But you shouldn't risk, your life shouldn't be at risk at the hands of someone who supposedly is there to protect you. And so I'm all behind police reform. I've said it on this episode, I said it on this podcast before, that I'm all behind police reform. But I'm glad to see what the state of Washington had did. And to wrap this all up, man, I'm appreciative to be here today. I'm appreciative of the conversations that we've had. I appreciate all the feedback that I get from you all. I appreciate the conversations that are happening in the media. I appreciate the representation that happened in the media. I appreciate the awareness that people have in regards to injustices across the world as a result of skin and religions, as we're seeing as well. I'm just appreciative of everything that has happened in the result of George Floyd's death. It's very unfortunate that this man's life had to be taken for us to get to this point, but I'm glad that we are able to reap the benefits of this. Again, I say that remorsefully because it sounds like I'm happy about someone dying. I'm never happy, but I'm glad that this man's life was not taken advantage. I cannot stress that enough. Thank you all for tuning into the Speak of Peace podcast. Now, what to watch for this week? If you have HBOMax, watch Southside. It's a sitcom. I just started watching. I think it's on Comedy Central as well, but I'm watching on HBOMax. Once again, my what to watch for this week is Southside. Once again, I appreciate you all for tuning into the Speak of Peace podcast. Subscribe. I can't say it enough. That's all I have for you all. I'm out.